Why ancient humans painted on cave walls. Let's go back in time. Not 100 years, not even 1,000. Try 40,000 years. We're deep inside the earth, a place with no sun, no landmarks, nothing familiar. The air is cold, it's damp, and it smells like wet rock and silence. The only thing lighting this place is a tiny flickering flame from a stone lamp burning animal fat, which makes the shadows on the walls dance like crazy. And in that flickering light, a human hand reaches out. It's covered in red paste, and it's about to press itself against the stone, leaving a mark that will last for 40 millennia. Why? Why are we here? Why did our ancestors go into the most dangerous, pitch-black, inaccessible parts of a cave to paint on the walls? For a long time, we told ourselves a simple story. They were painting for food, a kind of magical ritual to make sure the next hunt was a success. But what if that story is wrong? What if we're not looking at a hunter's playbook, but a cathedral? What if the real reason for all this wasn't about controlling the world outside, but about reaching into a hidden, spiritual world? What were they really times, doing down there? This is one of the biggest, most enduring mysteries in human history. A 40,000-year-old question that messes with everything we thought we knew about our earliest ancestors, and about the origins of art, religion, and consciousness itself. Section 1. The world of the first artists. Okay, before we can figure out their motives, we have to meet the artists. And to do that, you need to completely erase that cartoon image of the grunting, brutish caveman from your head. The people who painted the masterpieces at caves like Chauvet and Lascaux were not primitive. They were time's Homo sapiens. Anatomically, genetically, they were us. They were people with complex social lives, deep emotions, and minds capable of abstract thought, symbolism, and stunning creativity. They loved, they grieved, they were afraid, and they had dreams. And they lived in a world that is almost impossible for us to wrap our heads around. The last ice age, a vast, frozen tundra stretching across Europe, roamed by herds of giant animals, woolly mammoths, huge cave bears, massive steppe bison, and wild horses. Survival was a brutal, daily fight against the cold and the constant threat of starvation. Their world was full of immediate, physical danger. And yet, facing all of that, they did something absolutely extraordinary. They made art. And this was not a casual act. This was a monumental effort. First, they needed pigments. They had to go out into that harsh landscape to find and mine minerals. Iron oxides for reds and yellows, manganese dioxide for deep blacks. They burned wood to make charcoal. Then they had to grind these minerals into a fine powder, a slow, laborious process, using stones as mortars. After that, they had to turn the powder into paint. They experimented with binders, figuring out what worked through trial and error: water, maybe plant juices or saliva, and most effectively, animal fat. Then they had to actually paint. And they were masters of their tools, even though those tools were just fashioned from the world around them. They used their fingers to draw and dab paint. They likely crafted simple brushes from animal hair or twigs and used pads of moss or fur for shading. They even invented a kind of prehistoric airbrush, using hollow bones to spray pigment onto the wall. This is how they made those haunting hand stencils you see everywhere, placing a hand on the rock and blowing pigment over it, leaving a negative outline. It's maybe the most direct signature ever left. I was here. And where did they do all this? Not in the well-lit entrances of the caves where they might have lived. No, they chose to go deep into the earth, into chambers so remote that just getting there was a life-threatening journey. They had to squeeze through tiny tunnels, climb down treacherous drops, and cross underground rivers. The placement of some paintings high on the ceilings at Lascaux tells us they must have built scaffolding out of wood to even reach them. And they did all of this carrying their precious materials by the dim, flickering, oxygen-sucking light of animal fat lamps. So you have to ask the question again, and it feels even more urgent now. Why? Why go to such insane, life-threatening lengths? The sheer effort involved tells you this wasn't just decoration. This wasn't about sprucing up the living room. This was something critically, profoundly important. And for a long time, the world thought it had a simple, practical answer. Section 2. The First Great Mystery. Art for Dinner? At the beginning of the 20th century, a French archaeologist named Abbé Henri Breuil became the giant in the field of prehistoric art. He spent thousands of hours in these caves, sketching the paintings, and he came up with a theory that was powerful because it was so simple and logical: hunting magic. The formal name is sympathetic magic, and the idea is that like produces like. If you create an image of an animal, you gain some kind of control over it. By painting a bison on the wall, the artist was trying to summon a real one. By drawing spears hitting its side, they were magically ensuring a successful hunt. It's a really attractive theory. For a people whose entire existence depended on finding food, it makes perfect sense that they would use every tool they had, both physical and metaphysical, to secure their next meal. In this view, the paintings were a ritual. Before a big hunt, the clan gathers in the sacred darkness. The shaman paints the animal, and the hunters symbolically kill the image, a dress rehearsal for the real, dangerous thing. The art was a tool, a technology of hope, designed to put food on the table, and the evidence seemed to back it up. The walls are covered in the big animals that were central to their world: bison, wild horses, mammoths. In some caves, you do find animals marked with what look like spears or wounds. For decades, this was the accepted wisdom. Mystery solved. They painted for their dinner. It was a neat, tidy explanation that fit with our modern, practical way of thinking. But as more caves were discovered and our science got better, that tidy explanation started to fall apart. The simple theory of hunting magic was about to run into some very inconvenient facts. Section 3. The twist. When the evidence doesn't fit. The first, and probably most devastating blow to the hunting magic theory, came from the trash. Archaeologists are basically glorified garbage collectors. By analyzing the food debris, the animal bones left behind at campsites, we can tell exactly what people were eating. And a huge discrepancy showed up. The animals on the walls were often not the animals on the menu. Take Lascaux Cave, the prehistoric Sistine Chapel. Its walls are a breathtaking stampede of horses, giant bulls, and stags. And yet, when archaeologists looked at the animal bones from the site, a vast majority belonged to reindeer. So, how many reindeer are painted in this supposed magical menu for hunters? Almost none. And this pattern shows up all over Europe. At Altamira in Spain, famous for its incredible bison paintings, the main food source was red deer. If you were painting to magically guarantee a successful hunt, why would you almost exclusively paint animals you weren't eating? The second problem is the art itself. While a few animals have marks on them, the vast majority do not. They aren't scenes of slaughter. They're often portraits, filled with a sense of reverence and power. These artists knew these animals. They captured the curve of a bison's back, the toss of a horse's head, the thundering weight of a moving herd. They don't feel like targets, they feel like tributes. And you almost never see the hunt itself. Humans are conspicuously rare in this art, and when they do show up, they're often just simple stick figures, looking strangely insignificant next to the majestic, realistic beasts. And finally, there's the location. Why would you perform this hunting ritual in the deepest, darkest, most hidden parts of the cave? These weren't public spaces. They were secret sanctuaries, so remote that only a few people could have ever seen them. If the goal was a group ritual to get everyone psyched for the hunt, why not do it in the spacious cave entrance where everybody lived? Why go down into the underworld? The hunting magic theory, while it might explain some times of the art, just couldn't account for these massive inconsistencies. It became clear that something else, something weirder and much more profound, was happening in those caves. The answer wasn't about controlling the physical world. It was about entering another one. Section 4. Into the spirit world. Imagine it again. You're deep in the cave. The darkness is total. The silence is so deep it rings in your ears. Your little flame flickers. Shapes leap out of the rock. A bulge in the wall becomes the muscular shoulder of a bison. A crack becomes the leg of a horse. The cave itself feels alive. You aren't just in a cave. You are inside the earth. You are on the edge of another dimension. This is the foundation of the theory that has largely challenged hunting magic, shamanism. Pioneered by archaeologists Jean Klotz and David Lewis Williams, the shamanistic theory argues that these deep caves weren't art galleries, they were portals. They were sacred spaces where a spiritual specialist, a shaman, would go to connect with the spirit world. In countless hunter-gatherer societies we know of, shamans are people who can enter altered states of consciousness, or trances, to talk with spirits, heal people, or see the future. These trances can be brought on by sensory deprivation, chanting, drumming, or hallucinogens. And what happens in a trance? Neuropsychological studies suggest the human brain produces specific patterns of geometric shapes, dots, lines, grids. In deeper stages, these shapes can morph into familiar things, and people often feel like they're turning into an animal. Now, look at the cave walls again. They are covered in these exact same geometric signs. And what are the most powerful images? Animals. And in a few rare, fascinating cases, we see figures that are half human, half animal therianthropes. According to this theory, the shaman would go into the deep cave, where the darkness and silence would act as sensory deprivation, pushing them into a trance. The wall of the cave wasn't a blank canvas. It was a veil, a membrane between worlds. The shaman would see spirit animals moving inside the rock, and their job wasn't to paint an image times on times the wall, but to help the spirit times emerge from times the wall. This explains why the artists were so brilliant at using the natural bumps and cracks in the rock. That bulge times is times the bison's shoulder, that crack times is times the mammoth's tusk. The artist was just finishing the vision. This theory also explains the bizarre locations. The artists were seeking out the places where the veil between worlds was thinnest. And incredibly, recent research in a new field called Acoustics has added another layer: sound. It turns out that in many caves, the most heavily decorated chambers are also the places with the most amazing acoustics. Standing in the Hall of the Bulls at Lascaux, a human voice or a drum beat creates powerful echoes and reverberations. The sounds of the animals they were painting would have seemed to come alive all around them. The caves were instruments, and the rituals were likely an overwhelming multi-sensory experience of light, shadow, art, and sound, all designed to open a door to another reality. Section 5. A language we forgot. So, was it hunting magic or shamanic visions? The truth is, we're looking at an artistic tradition that lasted for over 30,000 years. That's longer than all of recorded history, from the first writing in Mesopotamia to the tweet you just read. To think they all did it for just one reason is almost certainly wrong. The purpose of the art likely changed dramatically over time and from place to place. Some paintings might have been for hunting rituals. Others could have been clan totems, a way of saying, we are the horse people. Some of the abstract geometric signs could be something even more complex. One recent, and still debated, hypothesis suggests that some of these recurring dots and lines might actually be a form of proto-writing or a calendar system, tracking lunar months to record when animals were mating or giving birth, a kind of prehistoric almanac. The caves could have been the first classrooms, used to teach young members of the group about animal behavior, myths, and traditions. The act of creating the art and participating in the rituals would have been a powerful way to build social bonds and a shared identity. It was a technology for making sense of a dangerous world, for imposing a human order on the chaos of nature. It was a language before writing, a way to pass down stories and knowledge from one generation to the next. We have to resist the urge to find one single key that unlocks the whole thing. Instead, we should see these caves as complex, multi-layered tapestries of meaning, woven over thousands of years. They were maybe cathedrals for spiritual journeys, textbooks for survival, and records of the seasons, all at the same time. The paintings weren't just pictures, they were functional. They were a tool for navigating the physical, social, and spiritual worlds. These first artists left their messages in stone, a signal sent across the ages that still mystifies us. We leave our marks in the digital world, but the human impulse to communicate, to share, and to solve puzzles is exactly the same. What do you think was the main reason for these incredible paintings? Was it magic, spirits, a calendar, or something we haven't even thought of? Let me know your theory in the comments. And if this trip into our deep past sparked your curiosity, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration. In the end, we may never find a perfect Rosetta Stone to decipher the precise meaning of every image and symbol. The people who held the keys to this world are gone, and their specific stories have faded into the silence of prehistory. But maybe the why is less important than the what. What these paintings give us isn't a simple answer, but a profound, humbling connection to our most distant ancestors. They pull back the curtain of time and show us that the people of the Ice Age weren't simple primitives, but intelligent, sensitive, and deeply spiritual human beings. They show us that the desire to create, to find meaning beyond just staying alive, and to leave a mark that says, "I was here," is one of the oldest and most fundamental parts of being human. The artist in the flickering firelight of Chauvet Cave, meticulously shading a charging bison some 36,000 years ago, is connected to Leonardo da Vinci sketching a bird's wing, and to every one of us today who picks up a pen, a camera, or a keyboard to express an idea. The medium changes, but the creative fire doesn't. These caves are the first great testament to the power of the human imagination, a testament written in darkness, born from wonder, and preserved in stone. They are the first masterpieces, reminding us that for as long as we have been human, we have looked at the world around us and within us and felt the burning need to make our mark.